Hola, un saludo muy especial. Pues estamos muy complacidos de dar inicio a esta cátedra, a la sesión número 4 de la cátedra en Arte y Clima y bueno, con unos invitados muy especiales que tenemos hoy desde Nueva Zelanda. Hablo inicio en español, pero bueno, continúa mi coanfitrión Ricardo Alfarra en español y en inglés. Un saludo muy especial para todas y para todos. Ricardo, muchas gracias por coordinar esta presentación hoy.
Gracias, Felipe. Yo voy a pasar entonces del español al inglés y dentro de un rato un poco más lejos del inglés todavía. So I'm switching now from Spanish to English. Welcome everyone to the session number 4 of the Balance-Unbalance Chair in Art and Climate. We started this project with the Jorge Tadeo Lozano University in Bogotá, with Felipe Cesar, who was talking just now. Also with support from the Maloca Science Center in Bogotá, and also with some support from Concordia University and the Arte Center from Utrecht University in Argentina. So every session is very different, with very different guests, with different approaches, but everything is always around not just climate change, but also other things that are related to climate change, environment, in general about life in the contemporary world, in terms of what's happening for different people from different cultures and how we live the changes that are happening in the world. So we have a very special group. Every session is very special, to be honest. I mean, it's very interesting what we are having, the guests we are having in every session. And let me start by introducing Ian Pasha-Cloutier, that he will give like a general introduction and context. And after we will have a number of presentations, as usual in these sessions. And later we will have time for a discussion. Those of you who are online, either on Facebook or YouTube, if you want to send us comments or questions, please do it, and we will receive it, and we will present that or comment that when possible during the session. So, Pasha Ian Cloutier is an 8th-generation descendant of Itiaure Bareba. Sorry, it's not that easy for me, so I will do my best. This is a small Pacific island. Pasha is a PhD candidate at Auckland University of Technology, New Zealand, which has a core focus on traditional Polynesian navigation techniques. Their work has been selected for 7 IC exhibitions, and they have curated international exhibitions under the leadership of Dr. Te Wirangi Waikere Pauru. Pasha's career extends to 110 public exhibitions in 17 countries, along with 27 publication credits, including the Oxford University Press Handbook of Sound Art in 2021. So Pasha, thank you, and thank you and Nina and everyone for being here, and especially I'm mentioning Nina and you because you were helping to put this session together. So welcome and thank you so much.
Kia ora, thank you very much for that introduction. Haere mai, nau mai. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Watawai Yoli and konnichiwa and hola. Welcome everybody to this presentation. It is part of Ricardo's ongoing project Balance-Unbalance. I do want to thank both Felipe and Ricardo and their team for hosting us here today. And I wanted to just briefly introduce our panel to give you some idea of the breadth. Matawhare Hoka is a highly respected kaumātua, which is like an elder or a leader, and also kaitiaki, a guardian. based in Parihaka, a very well-known site here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Desna Whana Sholem is a specialist in the boundary between Maori knowledge systems and Western science. Nina Sigledi has been involved in art science for many years and has been engaging with Indigenous peoples for over 30 years. So she's a little bit like a pioneer of work in this area. You've just heard from Ricardo about myself, and Dr. Michael Mcdonald is a fluid dynamicist who works in the University of Auckland. He and I have collaborated together, but he's going to present on a project that uses fluid dynamics software to generate patterns that are very similar to kōwhaiwhai, which is part of the visual culture of Māori. I also do want to acknowledge Dr. Te Hurirangi Iruwera Waikiripuru. When when Nina speaks, she will mention him, and he has been very much a leader. He is the person who put the emphasis on why, which is water or flow. That subsequently led to 6 or 8 intercreate projects around this theme of why energy flow. This is an example, a simple example of his influence on artists. This is the whenua, the land of Te Waipounamu, the South Island here. And these two artists, Josephine Stars and Leon Smialuski, they put the words of Hurirangi into the landscape. Waiotapu means sacred water, if you like. So first today, Ricardo will read the bios of the speakers before they present. First up, we have Marta Wharehoka, then Desna Whana Sholem, then Nina Sigledi, then myself, and then Michael Mcdonald. And then afterwards, we are looking forward to a good discussion around the issues. So I'll stop sharing now so that Ricardo can introduce Marta.
Thank you, Pasha. So Marta Wharehoka, I will introduce her as Pasha was saying, and then each presenter one by one. So Parihaka's Marta Wharehoka Taranaki is involved in her community and passing on knowledge to future generations. She has been the caretaker of the marae for nearly 30 years and is a driving force behind Parihaka's focus to be a self-sufficient community. Marta received a Nga Tohu Ata Kingi Ihaka Te Wakatoi Award in 2015. I hope you understood. Which honors Kaumatua and Kuya who have devoted their lives to strengthening Maori culture through their support of Maori arts. Sorry if my pronunciation is not good enough. Welcome, Marta. Very welcome.
Kia ora tātou, he mihi tere kia koutou I huhui mai, I tēnei rā, he mihi tēnei kia koutou rā, kia koe Desna, tino mihi tēnei kia koe me koe hoki Pasha. Rā kia koe, nena tō tino kaha ki te whai atu ngā tikanga o tō tātou ao, he mihi. I'm going to try and see if I can get up that presentation now, and I'd like to try doing that and make a go of getting it onto the screen. So I'm going to be guided by Pasha.
You need to do that share screen thing, you know, the little green button down the bottom there. You click
Right,
on
finding
that,
it.
and
Yes.
then yes, you should see a number of windows pop up. There you go. So now you just need, there you go. Yep. If you just navigate back to your first slide, and yeah, you can use the arrow keys to go back. Oh,
I think I'm going to have a little bit of difficulty with the sun behind me, but we'll give
That's okay.
things a go. And
if you have,
yep. I'll just hold this here. It might work for a little bit.
Can you just in your just go back to the first slide. Okay, keep going backwards, backwards, backwards. No, that's forwards.
The opposite direction.
Yeah. Go. Yeah. So now, on the left-hand side of your screen, if you see those slide views, if you scroll up, yeah, that's it. Keep going,
right.
keep going. Yeah, there you go. Now click on that one. You double-click that. Yep. And then now hit the slideshow button right down the bottom of the screen. That one there. Beautiful.
Wow.
Hey.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It's really brilliant seeing old people, over 70-year-olds trying to maneuver. So, kia ora.
Kia ora.
What I wanted to talk today, and I did welcome everybody and talk to those people who need to be talked to. And one of the things that I do want to talk about is the reclamation that I do and the revitalization that I do for our people. And I've started several projects, but the biggest project that we have on hand is working with Ranginui and Papatūānuku. And for that, I'm going to move on with the slides. And we're going to look at the progress that I've made on what I've called kahu whakatere. And you'll forgive me, I just finished at 5 o'clock this morning laying out one of the dead, one of whānau, and I had to travel an hour to get there and an hour to come home, and 6 hours managing the whole thing. So very late in the night we got it finished though, in time for me to be here today. So kahu whakatere, it's a very spiritual process, and I don't know how we as Māori can go anywhere in our lives without acknowledging the spirituality to which we are connected very, very deeply. So kahu whakatere is a process for us as Māori, and we know that somewhere, some place we leave and we arrive at when we're in the spirit world. And I'm sure all Indigenous cultures can relate to this. So we take a place when we leave this world, and I'm going to get onto that very soon. But I've got this kawakawa here, which symbolises death in our culture, and in Taranaki, it plays a big part in how we manage our dead. This signifies when somebody dies, we cut this plant, we cut the harakeke, which we'll see. And when we cut those, we're actually taking the life of plants that are produced by Mother Earth. So kahu whakatere, it's a process and I call it the art of dying. And I think there's got to be an art to dying, because we don't have a process. Not every one of us believes in the Bible. And this is one of the research that my husband and I had done. And what we learned was that the spirit of the ancestor leaves the body prior to them dying. And what they do, they travel to the loftiest mountain. So here in Taranaki, we have this beautiful mountain. It's not like this at the moment, but I love it because it captures exactly what I want people to feel. And this is a winter photograph. I haven't put the summer one on. And so our spirit would travel to that top of that mountain, and it would look and it would search for its spiritual resting place. And I truly believe in this. So it's a way of teaching us to understand that how our life for Māori actually ends for us. So that's our maunga taranaki. In fact, that's just outside my door. One of the things that we do know too is that we as Māori function on a few sort of basic values and beliefs, and aroha, which is love, is one of those things. Now, love can be seen in so many facets, and culturally, we know that love transcends all evil, and we know that when this is used in our lives every day, it works for us. When it's used in conflict resolution, it helps us as well. So this mat that is here, I made that about 6 years ago and used it on my daughter who passed away 3 years ago after a brutal murder. And so the love that we put into this mat is quite an amazing process, because, you know, we can fit 5 or 6 women on this mat weaving, which demonstrates that the energy and the effort that goes into this is all about aroha. And we know that it's never, ever limited to one space and place. And we use it in the growth of our children as well. And what I do know, it makes a lot of sense for our children to be part of this aroha in our culture. And we also know how important that sharing and caring. So the harakeke here, I've got this photograph. It's not a very good one, but what it does demonstrate, there are groups that you can see there of plants, and those plants grow in a family. And in this family, you can see the fans there. The fans represent the elders, the ancient ones, the young ones, and then it comes to this plant point here in the plant. Sorry. How do I go back?
There's a little row of buttons down the bottom of your screen. Oh, yeah, just do what you did before.
Sorry.
Yeah,
so
double click that and then down into your slideshow. Yeah, perfect. Merci.
So we use this value and this belief always, and this is what keeps our communities existing. If we didn't have it, we would not be where we are today. And I know that when we talk about sharing and caring, and we talk about this to my brother, and he says, well, nobody cared and shared with me. So that's why I went to live with the mob. And I understood what he meant, because he didn't feel that we were sharing and caring. So importantly, our people must feel this right from the word go. And I don't think the government actually gives us that grand opportunity of using these beliefs and values to the extent that we should be. So this plant here, this harakeke, represents families, and it represents the sharing and the caring. We use this plant to make rope. We use it to make the mats, and we use it to, well, it was used formerly in making our houses as well in ancient times. So this plant here exists because we need it to exist, and for us also to capture, regain, revitalize how we use this plant. Oops. So this big plant here, I wanted to show you the base of this harakeke to show that in this plant here, we talk about generosity and reciprocity. What it demonstrates to us, each leaf, and you can see where I've cut it, what it will do, it will give off a sap, and this sap is used as a medicine. So the generosity of this plant here, and it's not taught enough, because when we see plants in pa harakeke, where harakeke is kept, it's not kept beautiful like this. I try to keep mine like this in my backyard. Not always easy, but we do. And when we talk about harakeke, we talk about the generosity and the reciprocity that we give back to Mother Nature. So Mother Nature, we refer to her as Papa Tūnuku and to him as Rangi Nui, because they both make the world right for us. And in fact, it was Rangi Nui, the Sky Father, and Papa Tūnuku, Earth Mother, who created everything that we have today. They created the way we live, our beliefs, our entire environment. They set down the controls, they set down the justice system, the education system, and the health system. We needed to go on to the preservation of history. What we did find was there wasn't sufficient information in any records, any research on how they actually maintained people who were dying, or how they wrapped them, or how they sent them off in their last hours into Papa Tūnuku, into the earth. What we've discovered during our learning on how to create something that we believe is traditional for us now, because we've used all the natural parts that come from plants from Papa Tūnuku. And so we honour Earth Mother for that. And we know that because we talk about Papa Tūnuku and Rangi Nui, they are historical, and they had lots of children. And one of them was Hene Te Iwa Iwa, and she was the goddess of all things that is women, Wahine. A fabulous goddess to remember. In fact, if I could be as well as she, I'd be brilliant. Then the revitalisation process that we've entered into for Māori, it's been organic for us. It's been 150 years of, I think there's been 150 years of struggle to be Māori in our own land, and to hold on to the language and hold on to our culture that was ours. We shouldn't have ever had gone to school to learn how to be a Māori, but we had to. And that's part of the sadness of our history. But it's not just limited to Māori. We know that this is the end of the creative carrier that we've designed for our people to go to Mother Earth in. And what we believe is that by not embalming our people, by wrapping them in a beautiful mat like this, by putting by putting all of these elements together, we actually have a very, very fine process to the point that we're now looking for funding to create an area that people can come to learn to make these units, so that we all don't have to go to Mother Earth in coffins. A lot of people may think it's a bit arrogant of us to do this, but we don't think we we are arrogant at all. We're so happy that we're able to do something like this. And what I can say from this exercise, that we've not had to go to look for any funding to create this, and we've been doing this for 15 years. And that's the end of my slideshow. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Marta.
Can I just do the waiata?
Yes, do please.
Okay. He maru ahi ahi kei muri, te maru awatea, he paki aro i kei mua. After the shades of darkness come the dusk of dawn, whilst before lies the shimmering glory of a fair day. Kia ora rā.
Kia ora, Marta. Thank you so much. So, yes?
Just can you stop your screen sharing, Marta? You need to stop it now. It should be at the top of the screen. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you. So I'm going to introduce Desna Fanga Sholum now. Desna's work is connected through the exploration and articulation of cultural identity. Projects see her collaborating with a wide variety of communities, business and design professionals, artists and academics to achieve results with effect changing people, practice and place. Desna is actively involved in Maori identity design, discourse and stakeholder engagement in Aotearoa via design consultancy, research, exhibitions, waranga, speaking engagement, and governance roles. Her work also involves exploring Matauranga Maori traditional knowledge, values within resource. Those resources she's meaning like mainly, or for example, environmental management. So thank you so much, Desna, for being here, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Welcome.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui. Ko rongo mai wahine me kahungunu me Ngāti Pāhau ngā iwi, ko Ngai Tahu Matawhaiti tōku hapu, no mahia hau, ko Taiporutu tōku kāinga tūturu, ko Paukaua tōku kāinga anaine, ko Desna Fanga Sholum tōku ingoa. So, kia ora whānau. I'm just going to try and share my screen here. As I introduced myself, my home is Taiporutu, and this is looking down onto my whare, my house. It's also my ancestral home. Taiporutu translates to the sound of the sea booming on the rocks. So the reef that you can see directly out from my place is also called Taiporutu, and the sound of those rocks boom right up the valley. This was also the landing place of my ancestral waka, the Takitimu. When Māori identify themselves, we usually identify ourselves by our ancestral landscapes and our connections to our whakapapa, our genealogical connections to the moana, so the ocean, and our voyaging waka, which have traversed the Pacific for more than 21 generations. My whānau have occupied this particular piece of land for 21 generations. When I speak of my iwi, so my tribes, Rongamai Wahine and Kahungunu, are two eponymous ancestors. So Rongamai Wahine and Kahungunu were 21 generations before me. My second name, Whanga, comes from my ancestor, Ihaka Whanga. He had 3 wives, and I'm from the 3rd wife. So those are some of our genealogical lines. When we talk about whakapapa, we also mean more than genealogy. It means our history and our layered understandings of place and our connection to place. it also encompasses a concept of our historical events and the way that our knowledge is interconnected. Māori have been, as Whaia was speaking about before, Māori have been on a very large journey to reinstate our faces and our places for a long time, and also reinstate our cultural ancestral knowledges, and uphold the Treaty of Waitangi, which is kind of our constitutional document for New Zealand, which should theoretically have two sovereign knowledge systems, and one of those is Māori, and the other is largely, well, a Western framework that's based on the British Crown. Part of our process of re-establishing those two knowledge systems is, through the treaty claims, is doing the research around how we understand ourselves and our connections to place. So one of the early jobs that I did for my people was looking at our sites, our cultural sites of significance at home. Our hapu, as well as, which is like a clan, a sub-tribe, went out and visited a lot of our ancestral sites together and told our stories in those places in order to be able to gather our knowledge. This is a valley that's behind some of my ancestral maunga called the Waiatai Valley, which translates to the waters of the sea. At the head of the Waiatai Valley, there's a little maunga, which is a small hill, which is also called Waiatai. And our historical pūrākau, or ancestral story, talks about 7 whales that used to go, the tohunga, the ancestral knowledge holder, used to send out his whales every day, and they went out and gathered a whole lot of news for the people, and they brought it home, and they talked to all of the different sort of sharks and stingrays and the snapper and all of the fish that were around that area. And there was one little whale who's the one that's at the head of the Waiatai Valley, who had a tendency to sleep in, and he slept one morning. He'd been doing this a hell of a lot, and so our tohunga turned him into a hill as punishment, which is it's a very kind of, it's a memorable fable, shall we say, that talks about our knowledge systems. But what has been discovered is that I think it's about sort of 1,500 years ago, is there's an inundation of seawater in this valley, which is a long way from the coast. But that's encoded within those pūrākau, within our ancestral stories. So part of our treaty claims process is go out and visiting all of these places and remembering these stories and sharing them, and then recording them and using them as our proof to the Crown that we belong to these places. We also have community houses, which are marae, and we use these to connect with each other and to debate topics, and to acknowledge our ancestors, and to hold our tūpapaku, those that have passed, but to also celebrate life and to make many, many major decisions as a community. And within the walls and the rafters and the entire house is carved and painted and woven, and all of these art forms are, for us, they're historical knowledge, but they're also their contemporary knowledge and their ways of connecting with the environment. They are a form, when you are creating these artworks, in itself is a form of knowledge, of embodied knowledge, which references mātauranga. And it talks about the way that we know our places. We also, some of our contemporary work that we've been doing at home are looking at things like our ancestral lakes and foreshore, and doing restoration projects around these. So this particular piece of foreshore here has been getting eroded because of all of the pinga, which is the rushes that hold together the banks along there, have been eaten out by stock. And so there's been a project to restore all of the pinga, which is also a really highly prized weaving material, along those banks, and get all the stock out and put back the flora and fauna that should usually be there, and also just using things like the driftwood along the beach to try and create new barriers to stop that being washed out. So part of our treaty claims, again, this is my mum and one of my hapu cousins out there sort of discussing the history and how that connects to the different places across that area. yeah, sorry. So that's a foreshore that heads from one of my hapu, one of my sub-tribes over to my home, which is Mahia. This is another waka landing spot for the Takitimu. So yeah, I referred to the Takitimu that landed at Taiporitu. I'd say that the Takitimu is probably more like 25 generations before me. So Rua Wharo, who was the tohunga that was on our voyaging, which is like a high priest or person that has a lot of knowledge. When he was in charge of the Takitimu, this was one of the places that it landed at home. This is a view from a power site, so it's an ancestral occupation point. And I think it's the last power site that Kahungunu and Rongamai Wahine lived on. So these two people here were our Rongamai Wahine iwi chair and also our Kahungunu iwi chair. So we've visited these places together and tried to reconnect and, as I said, tell our stories in those places. Much later on, part of my journey has been reconnecting with the waka haurua. So I spoke of the voyaging waka that, 25 generations before, when we were circumnavigating the Pacific a lot, we used waka haurua, which are double-hulled, double-sail waka. So they get places extremely fast, very efficient, and it's the way that our ancestors have navigated the Pacific for many generations. This has been regenerated in New Zealand because one of our waka, very knowledgeable waka person, went to Hawaii, Heck Busby, and regenerated the knowledge around how we voyage. And so our people are out there every day on these waka now, doing the things that our ancestors did, obviously, with solar panels and a few more flash things than they had back then. It was really important for me when I went out on the waka haurua to actually start to understand our deep connection with the moana, with the ocean, and the way that we connect with our landscapes, and be able to see like a different sort of sightline of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and our landscapes, because often we kind of get stuck in a mode of looking at ourselves as only being connected to the land. But once I'd been out on that waka and I understood our connection to the moana, to the ocean, things really changed for me. A lot of my artwork that is therefore after these kinds of experiences that I've drawn upon are things like the moko, so our ancestral artworks that draw on our tāmoko, which is a kind of a tattooing within our skin. So I've looked at ways that I can reinscribe our ancestral identity back into the landscape through these artworks. Installation work, so these are porama, so light posts, and with these I've been looking at the kōwhaiwhai, which were in that marae imagery that you saw earlier, and then having these on po that change light over the night. They kind of cycle through different soft colours, and what I was trying to draw upon there was the Māori, so the energy that we have from these places, which is our ancestral energy as well. And the connection that they have to place, and also I think thinking about the ephemeral nature of the spirituality within our culture, and how do we sort of start to represent that. Whaia was speaking earlier about things around our spirituality in terms of that being a large part of the way that we identify ourselves. So kōwhaiwhai design references sort of the tapu and the no, so the sacred and the open, and it also references the light and the dark and the balance, and how these two things sort of are constantly interacting with each other. So we acknowledge both, obviously, the death and life, and how these interact with each other. All of our taonga, so our artworks that we have, and our ancestral artworks and our contemporary artworks, are said to hold the Māori of the people that created them, so the energy of the people that created them. These kind of knowings are also embedded within our whare. So one of the roles that I hold is the chairperson of Ngā Aho, which is the national network of Māori designers. We have around about 200 Māori designers. that are work within architecture and landscape architecture and engineering and planning. The kaitiaki, so the guardians of the environment, and they're also their storytellers. So we've been around for, I think, about 17 years or so. We have partnerships with so New Zealand Institute of Architects, New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects, the Planning Institutes. We do consultation for the Ministry for the Environment, looking at things like the Resource Management Act, which is a significant piece of legislation in New Zealand that deals with everything within the environment. We've also connected in more recent years with an international network of other Indigenous designers, so work with people in Canada and the States and Nigeria and Australia and across the Pacific. Some of my other mahi that I've done recently is working for the National Science Challenge Sustainable Seas. So within that, I'm working mainly with the Māori researchers, Māori scientists, and telling their stories. So picking up some of the research that they're doing and sharing that with various different audiences. This is a piece that I've just started working on called Te Ao o Te Moana, which is talks about the voice of the moana, so the voice of the sea, and the different ways that we connect with this. And I'm interviewing our Māori scientists, and they tell their stories. I'll just share this video briefly.
That sense of disconnection and loss, I think, has had a big influence on me. And the woman on that side of the family, intergenerational trauma is rife throughout it. From my nan, and I'm sure probably her nans, and my female cousins and myself. I think that's affected who I am and why I do what I do, the Māori research that I do, and wanting to maybe help other people understand that disconnection and not really knowing your identity, having all these feelings of connection within yourself. You know, like my mum's aunties, I'm very connected to and I love them, but I don't get to see them that much. I have memories of when I was younger and one of my mum's aunties made me a bone carving necklace, and it was such a special tonga to me. I want to help, through my research, other people to reconnect with themselves and their whakapapa and their place within Aotearoa and their connections to the environment as well, because I think that's all interconnected. That sense of disconnection and loss.
Some of the other work that our researchers have been doing, looking at those ancestral stories. So Hui Te Ananui is an ancestral house that was under the moana, so within the sea. And from that particular pūrākau story comes a lot of knowledge about our mātauranga, so our knowledge systems and how our art forms are generated, and also how we understand our connection to the environment. And from those ancestral stories and the learnings and the values that are shared within them, we've been drawing out ways that we could better manage our environment, so work with it and work alongside it and have a healthier relationship. There are things within those stories as well that do talk about our protocols, and they talk about our ecosystems. They talk about the way that we want to be able to operate, or should be able to operate as Māori, which is self-determination. Our connections, our guardianship of place, our ability to have compassion for each other in spiritual dimensions. So we've been teasing out some of these concepts as well. I do sort of diagrams from some of our researchers' work that look into concepts like kaitiakitanga, which is our primary way that we relate to the environment, and what is kaitiakitanga made up of. So it is more, currently in the Resource Management Act, it's generally understood as just a guardianship of place, but there's so many more different rich aspects to it, like the spiritual beliefs and how do we connect with our taonga, so our things that we value. There are human aspects to it, there are non-human aspects to it. So a lot of my work is around how do I bring some of those stories more to make them more visible for people to be able to pick them up, and also highlighting sort of the academic papers and the treaty papers and etc. that back up this kind of research. We've also been looking at sort of Māori ways of knowing and doing and being, and how that applies to our business models. So kaitiaki, being guardians or being in relationship with the environment, that puts that as your highest value sitting within business models. So exploring those types of ideas. Also looking at things like how do we use our knowledge systems to develop the business models and to make really healthy places for people and to prioritize the well-being of the environment whilst we're doing this, so that they're not, well, in competition with each other, I guess. Also looking at legislation. Some of our researchers are looking at legislation, both in Aotearoa but also internationally, and how do we use, again, our ancestral knowings of place to be able to guide better legislation to look after our environment, and tying them up with things like the so ecosystem-based management, and how does that connect with a Māori way of knowing and doing and being. So that's some of my work, and I just want to say thank you for this time, and greetings to your ancestors that you bring with you and that you embody in your work. We gather together not only as designers and artists and architects and landscape architects and writers and all of the myriad ways that we connect with our environment, but we're also mother and father and daughter and son, granddaughter and grandson. We gather as our whole selves. So kia ora to you and to your trees and your birds and your whales and your eels and your lands. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Desna. Kia ora. Very interesting. I hope we will have time at the end to talk more about some of the topics you were bringing. But now time is flying, so I'm going to introduce Nina Sekledi. Welcome, Nina, a time supporter of Balance-Unbalance. So thank you also for helping us to put this session together. Nina Sekledi collaborates on art, science, and technology projects internationally. She's adjunct professor at Ontario College of Art and Design University, research fellow at KMDA, University of Toronto, member of the governing board of Leonardo International Society for Art, Science and Technology, also co-chair of Leonardo Laser, chair of intercreate.org in New Zealand, and researcher at NOEMA in Italy. Some of her upcoming curatorial projects are Light Footprint in the Cosmos, that will be in Vancouver, 2022, and Sensoria, the Art and Science of Our Senses in, I think it's Poland, in 2022. I think there are some noises in what I'm saying, so give me 1 second. Let's see if now it's working better. And about some of her recent curatorial projects, we have Agents for Change, Facing the Anthropocene in Canada, 2020, Who's You in the Raid Gallery in New Zealand, 2019, and also the celebration of Leonardo 50th anniversary in Ars Electronica in Austria in 2018. Sekledi pioneered international tour exhibition of experimental art, including the art of indigenous people. So welcome so much. Welcome, Nina. Thank you again for helping to put this together.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you, Ricardo and Felipe, for the Cátedra Balance-Unbalance public discussions. They are really wonderful. Even if I don't understand everything, when everything is Spanish, I sit through and try to make out what it is. And I sincere thanks for Pasha, for Marta, Trudy, Tracy, Desna, Kate, everybody who was and is involved with Solar Circuit New Zealand. So I am a first-generation settler of Central European descent, living in the traditional territory of many diverse First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Chippewa, and the Wendat people. And I am clearly aware that I am a guest in all of these spaces, a very active guest, but nevertheless, I am a guest. Now I have to try to share my screen. Okay, here we are. So My involvement with Indigenous art and artists dates back decades to co-curating with Dr. Peter Lewin, the first exhibition of the contemporary woodland artists in Canada, and then we went abroad. I met and worked during this time with many woodland artists, and Carl Ray, who is a founding member of the now very famous Group of Seven, gave me this painting, and I'm very proud of it. It's just hanging above me here by my dining room chair. For the Welcome Canada Festival in Budapest in 1993, I curated an Inuit film program featuring the films of Zacharias Kunuk. It was the very first time that Indigenous contemporary art was shown in Budapest. And I have to tell you that that program had to be repeated 3 times by popular demand because it was so successful. I'm very proud of that. So during all this work, I became dedicated to the values and the traditions of the art and the holistic understanding of nature by Indigenous people around the world. The solar residency in Tasmania in 2002 was the site of the first contact with Pasha. 30 of us media artists arrived to Maria Island in Tasmania, a former penitentiary colony and now protected home for wildlife. And here, among the kangaroos and snakes, but no internet access, Pasha and I discussed his concepts and first plans for solar circuit in New Zealand. And in the ensuing years, the rich scant story of artist residencies, exhibitions, symposia led to contacts and collaborations. The Cátedra Balance-Unbalance public discussions are focused on art and climate. I intend to explore features of the cultural political climate of Indigenous presence and future contribution to the international art science scene. From the very beginning, the very first Scans residence in 2006, we greatly benefited from the wisdom of Dr. Tehuirangi's participatory presence at our sessions. His insightful questions and comments stimulated with everyone. He was so pleasant and knowledgeable, and he went to everybody and talked to everybody in great friendship and with great knowledge. The intimacy of these sessions and my personal conversations with him, and also witnessing his sunrise greetings in Istanbul or his illuminating presentation in Albuquerque, remain unforgettable for me. From the start, the mostly biannual Scans residencies began each time at the Maori meeting place. These immersive introductions to the residences made deep, long-lasting impressions, especially on those participants who arrived from distant locations. They still talk about it. The Scans structure and agenda provided a fertile ground for subsequent transnational contacts and connections, and also collaborations. My long commitment to Scans is grounded on values, traditions, and the holistic appreciation of nature based on thousands of years of traditional experience by many indigenous cultures around the world, from the Samis to the Maoris, everywhere. The concept, as you are all aware, form an integral part of indigenous philosophy, including the notions that everything is connected to everything else. Everything is in a state of constant change. The study of interconnectedness between plants, animals, including the human body, is now also confirmed scientifically, leading to the belief in a cosmos composed of processes and events, as opposed to the Western way of thinking, a cosmos composed of facts and things. In the world of arts and science, international conferences, few, if any, feature indigenous issues. This act inspired me to attempt cracking the walls of some conference strongholds. Together with Pasha, we began at ICEA 2015 in Vancouver. I invited to the Value of Knowledge Transfer indigenous speakers from different lands, including Maori, Navajo, and Inuit representatives, to discuss their perspectives on digital technologies in relation to their knowledge heritage, particularly based on their personal and communal experience. Pasha, on behalf of ICEA International, welcomed the participants. The forum opened discussions on the impact of global and local paradigm shifts and blurred boundaries in our digital age, and how they may affect the transmission of knowledge across generations. Our presenters included Utadeo, internationally known Maori artist; Nina Bavington, Navajo artist from the US, currently a Mellon Fellow at the Heart Museum; Stacey McDonald, Inuit artist from Nunavut, who produced water music during her residency at Cairns. And this artwork features traditional Inuit throat singing, and she is throat singing here at ICEA. And that artwork imitates the sound of the environment and was used originally as a game between women to soothe the babies which they carried on their backs. Then we had Norris Jason, member of the Leech Lake Band of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, whose research is focused on creative activism by indigenous women. Participants addressed modes of knowledge transfer, sites of resistance, forms of cross-cultural collaboration, and means of disruption, settler-colonial relations. The success of this event led to the value of the knowledge transfer in Abayayala, co-curated and co-presented with Professor Adriana Gomez-Alzata at ICEA 2017 in Manizales, Colombia. The forum in Manizales opened a debate about the impact of international and local politics, paradigm changes, and an analysis of transformation affecting heritage of different cultures through generations. What should be the strategies and tactics to implement a proper transfer of shared knowledge in the future? What are the existing opportunities to achieve an intercultural and intergenerational cooperation? Our keynote speaker was Professor Eldon Yellowhorn, a member of the Piikani First Nation from Canada. Indigenous international presenters included Utadeo, Jose Luis Romero and Emmanuel Tappel from Mexico, representatives of 8 indigenous communities in Colombia. They also presented. And I would like to mention here that in all of these events, all the speakers were of indigenous background. Joe Tito in Manizales, in collaboration with Jamie Berry and Josiah Jordan, also exhibited the beautiful installation Ko Engi, Ko Papa, Ko Puta, Ko Rongo at the Centro Cultural Universitario Rugelli Silmona. So in conclusion, ecological art initiatives are both questioning and confronting the ways in which we have interfered in the natural environment. They remind us to remember, reflect, reconsider, and ultimately re-evaluate how we relate to the world around us. And this artwork is by Raven Turner from New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Just let me go back to the screen. Right, we are there. So thank you so much, Nina. We are going to have Pasha Ian Clothier now. So I was introducing him before, but let me just briefly say, Pasha is an independent hybrid Polynesian artist specializing in electronic art and cosmology. So I'm summarizing a little bit. So Pasha, welcome.
Okay, yes, thank you very much for that. And so before I commence my my presentation, just to kind of gather up what we've just seen, we heard from Marta about this interconnected world that Maori live within, and it's very interesting. In the interconnected world, one point can get you to any other point. So when she was discussing harakeke, which is the woven plant, she also talked about family, about whānau, and we might revisit those points. And then we saw with Desna how she's bringing some of this awareness of the interconnection, bringing that to the creation of artworks, but also to engaging with the environment, to look at ways of engaging. And then Nina has now shared with us the work that she's been doing over so many years to engage with the Indigenous voice, which is fairly critical to our futures. All right, so what I would like to discuss today is Indigenous practices and Western science in dialogue, because I see this as really as critical. And you can see at the bottom of the slide actually that we reference SCANS 2022. I meant to say in the introduction that SCANS has been a biennial event every 2 years since 2006, except for COVID years. And recently, Mata Wharehoka and the whānau, the community of Parihaka, have become the hosts. So one of the Leonardo events involved, Roger Molina and other people Skyping into SCANS inside the very whare, the very house that Mata is kaitiaki of. All right, so one of the threads was the wakahaurua, the double-hulled canoe. This is the traditional Polynesian navigation and current Polynesian navigation, but that based in traditional is a major research focus. for me, and I will be referring to this as one of the central points of engagement. But one of the things that is emerging from the DNA record and the radiocarbon dating record is it is now quite clear that Polynesians were explorers in exactly the same way as James Cook. So there is DNA evidence of interconnection between Native American indigenous peoples in Colombia and Polynesians dating to 1150, which actually was prior to the time that that Rapa Nui or Easter Island was settled. So, and then due to the radiocarbon dating record, it's now understood that actually that there were multiple voyages and that the furthest points were explored first. And then settlement was backfilled in islands that had been discovered. So, and as I say, this has arisen out of the current work around DNA and radiocarbon dating, and it's only emerging because some of the presumptions that have been based on earlier research, some of those assumptions they looked down, if you like to say, on Polynesian. So it wasn't quite understood the majesty of Polynesian navigation. And I guess the framework for this discussion about bringing Indigenous knowledge and knowledge systems into dialogue with technology and Western metaphysics comes from Hui Yuk. And his work around the concept of cosmotechnics. So what I'm looking at is the ways that Indigenous diffractive practices can enter into dialogue with technology and Western metaphysics. And then this is backgrounded against the Anthropocene. So Hui is arguing basically that we need to have this discussion in order to get around the Anthropocene, in order to get around the climate crisis. And his thesis is that the Industrial Revolution led to the separation of matter from physics, and that separation has led us to the Anthropocene. And I'll just discuss that a little bit more. So this thing, the loss of matter from physics, so no longer was physics involved with metaphysics, it became simply physics. And that removed the ethical basis for physics. And it led to the situation where we're currently in, where quite a bit of science has actually been used to, has been engaged in environmental degradation. Quite a bit of science and knowledge has been used in being deleterious or having negative impacts on people, particularly Indigenous peoples. That's all part of this thing of not really having an ethical approach, an ethical understanding in your wider picture. And so it is necessary actually to return ethics to science. This is going to be critical to resolving climate change, actually. And then it's not just science that needs to do it. We have to do it in art. We have to do it in business. And then, you know, Desna was talking about some of the business models, the kaupapa Māori businesses, which is the protocols of Māori business, often involve an ethical approach. So I subscribe to a power company, No Mai Rā, and then they give some of their profits back to people or they help out people who are vulnerable in regard to their power supplies. That's the kind of business model that we need. And actually we have to restore ethics to all human activity. You see, this is the thing, although, you know, to many of us or to some of us, it might have been quite foreign when Marta was speaking about the spirituality. We basically need that kind of fuller awareness to all the things that we do. So I'm just going to focus for a little moment on one of these dialogues between Indigenous knowledge, between what we call traditional kai whakatiri or traditional navigation. And it's on the subject of wave diffraction. So this here is a diagram by from the 1990s. It's by an academic who was also a Marshall Islander, so had a strong awareness of traditional navigation techniques. And one of the things that that Desna referenced was one of her people, Hick Busby, traveling to Hawaii in order to gain the knowledge of traditional navigation. Well, he probably would have got that knowledge from Nainoa Thompson and Nainoa Thompson's colleagues. And then Nainoa Thompson himself got his knowledge of traditional navigation from Mau Palang, who was a Marshall Islander. So the Marshall Island navigators are seen as having this continuity of traditional knowledge. And the critical point that I want you to observe in this diagram, that basically the swell or the current is flowing from right to left. You can see some gets reflected, which is point A, some gets diffracted, which is point B. Some of the current moves around the island, and where it meets up, which is point E, you get a line of foam in the sea, and also obviously the waters are choppy. And then one of the ways that traditional navigators navigate actually is by going down to the hull of the waka, the hull of the canoe, and lying on it so that they can feel in their bodies what the currents are doing. Because you have to understand, a lot of people think, oh, Polynesian navigators, they just navigated with the stars. Well, actually, you know, if it's overcast and you're in the ocean and it's night, the sky is black, you can't see a star. And because the water reflects what's in the sky, the sea is black. So Nainoa Thompson, he talked about sometimes you can't even see a few meters in front. So and what is interesting about this is that diffractive patterns or interference patterns are a core component of the wave particle duality nature of light. This is actually Young's drawing from, I think this is actually 1803, this one, where he did an experiment. These are diffractive patterns in water, and you can see the interference patterns created. These are the same ones that Polynesian navigators feel or observe when they're navigating. This diagram here is pretty well known over the internet. It's actually based on an 1807 experiment it's a double slit experiment. This has been updated in the 20th century, and actually diffractive wave patterns and wave particle duality have been central to most 20th century discussion around quantum theory. And it's given a lot of prominence by Karen Barrard, who's a quantum theorist that's quite prominent at this point. So to just kind of gather all this up a bit, when we have a look at this, at what's happening at the boundary of this dialogue, we locate a number of intersection points. And then one of the intersection points is going to be discussed in the presentation following by Michael Mcdonald. But the other thing is that we need to understand is we need to kind of update our awareness about science, because it's previously been thought that Maori knowledge systems did not involve science. Well, actually, when you look closely, they are, because these navigators are making observations about the world. They are speculating about the causes of those observations, and then they're looking to have that observation reinforced through multiple experiences. Once it is once they have that and it's shared across across generations, then it becomes shared with all of the other navigators. So that's the process. It's a little bit different from, in Western science, we're used to this process where there's an idea, like Newton's idea about the universe. There is subsequent work that's done which revises that. In Indigenous knowledge systems, it's a little bit different, that you still have the observation, the scientific method, but it changes because it gets into the multi-generational discourse as confirmed knowledge. And through this very, very careful observation of nature, many of the assumptions and many parts of the knowledge inside Indigenous belief systems have actually been now confirmed by science, right? So a while ago, and Maori were discredited for saying that humans, that they descended from the stars, whereas now that is a conventional truth in Western science. The conventional picture of how it all came about and the development of living forms out of the soup, that's now a common view. And then I guess one of the things that's different about Indigenous and Western knowledge, one of the things is scales. That's true, but it's the attention to nature and the natural environment that has provided Indigenous knowledge with all of the awareness that you need. And then the other thing about Indigenous cosmology, as we've heard from Marta and Desna, is that it is founded in ethics. It's a way of being. It's a kind of holistic approach, as was said indeed. And then the West needs these. We desperately need these ethical approaches because we are approaching a time when the natural environment to whenua is doomed. And then the other thing is that we need to accept the knowledge from Indigenous people that we need to take care. We need to have some ethics about our grandchildren, about our future generations, because they're going to wind up inheriting a hell on earth if we don't actually move really soon. Okay, and so it's not really about being policemen or being the right way. It's no matter what you do, how can you reduce your resource usages? How can you reduce wastage? How can you contribute to making a better place for future generations? Those are really critical components in the discourse around the environment that we're having today. So thank you so much to Felipe, Ricardo, and also Nina and all of the panel members for contributing to this session.
Thank you, Pasha. Just give me a second. Here I am. Thank you so much once again, and for helping to put this together. Let me introduce Felipe. I don't know if you want to say something. Okay. I'm going to introduce Dr. Michael Mcdonald then. Dr. Mcdonald is a lecturer in fluid mechanics and aerodynamics in the Department of Mechanical Engineering of the University of Auckland in New Zealand. His postdoctoral scholarship was with NASA's JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Caltech, along with research into the numerical simulation of turbulent heat and fluid flows. He's currently working on the intersection of Ko-Fi-Fi, a Maori traditional visual art form, and fluid dynamics, together with Pasha Clothier. So welcome, Michael. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for the introduction. Kia ora. So let me just bring up my presentation. Okay. Yes, so my background is in engineering and fluid mechanics. And what I'll be talking about today is some work that I've been doing with Pasha, where we're looking at the intersection between this idea of fluid dynamics or fluid mechanics and Core 5.5. So probably, or some people may not have heard of the term fluid dynamics, but essentially what it refers to is the movement of the fluid. And that fluid could be something like water, which most people are probably familiar with, but it can also be air. So when you dig down into the physics, the movement of air around a room or around the planet is actually governed by the same dynamics and laws as the movement of water. So examples of fluid dynamics are everywhere in nature. The movement of hydrogen within the sun follows the principles of fluid dynamics. Also, the movement of air and clouds within our atmosphere, so climate change and meteorology are governed by fluid dynamics. And within our bodies, there's an idea of biofluid mechanics, so the movement of blood through our heart and arteries, or of air through our lungs. Now, in engineering, typically what we're trying to do is we may be trying to move a fluid around. So through canals and aqueducts, trying to move water from one location to another, or in the pipelines, trying to move oil and gas. And if I move on to my own discipline, which is in mechanical engineering, often what we're trying to do is move an object through a fluid. So the design of an aircraft and the aerodynamics that go into that is essentially looking at an application of fluid dynamics. Similarly, the design of ships, looking at the movement of water and the hydrodynamics, is also an application of fluid dynamics. Now, typically, when I introduce this idea to undergraduate students at the University of Auckland, these are the kinds of examples that I use. But I don't just have to look at these kind of modern engineering examples. I can also look at Indigenous knowledge. And in fact, in multiculture, the design of kites also demonstrates some aerodynamics knowledge. And as we've talked about earlier, the design of wakas, these double-hulled canoes, also demonstrate a very strong understanding of aerodynamics through the sail design and also through hydrodynamics through the design of the actual waka hull. So these, as I mentioned, are applications of fluid dynamics. So what I want to do is go back and see knowledge embedded in multiculture. And for that, I can turn to Core 5.5. So these are the kind of swirling patterns that we see often on the ceilings or rafters of maraes. So you may have noticed them in Disney's photographs. And actually we can, there's this image here which is taken from during James Cook's first voyage around New Zealand from 1769. And these are basically paddles. And again, they demonstrate some very interesting ideas around fluid dynamics and the movement of water or air. So I'd like to analyze this, these Core 5.5 patterns and see if I could try to recreate them using some of the tools that I use in my own research of fluid dynamics. And in particular, I'll analyze this in the context of what's known as a von Karman vortex street. So this is a classical problem in fluid dynamics. It's attributed to von Karman from 1907. And essentially what we have here is a cylinder, which is located just here, and there's flow coming down from above. And as it passes over the cylinder, we get this periodic shedding occurring with these counter-rotating vortices. Now, as I said, this is a classical problem. For one, because it's quite a fascinating one, because it occurs at such a huge range of scales. So on the left, I have images of basically laboratory scale experiments. So here, the water might be moving at a few centimeters per second from left to right, and the cylinders maybe a few centimeters in diameter, and we get this von Karman vortex street occurring. But what's interesting is that it also occurs at much larger Reynolds numbers. So the Reynolds number is sort of a way to analyze and break down the scales of the problem. So when we have scales on the order of kilometers with wind speeds of tens of meters per second, we can write this as a Reynolds number to more easily compare these to the laboratory scale. But we see this is an enormous Reynolds number, very high, large length scales and velocity scales. And what we have here is the North Island of New Zealand. This is Mount Taranaki here. And what we see is that as the wind blows from south, it blows around Mount Taranaki, and you get the same von Karman vortex street occurring, which is visible from the clouds. So I'd like to simulate this using some of the tools in my own fluid dynamics research. And to do that, I'll be using what's called computational fluid dynamics, or CFD. And this is where we put our laws of nature into a computer and let the computer simulate and solve them. So these equations are the governing laws of nature for fluid dynamics. They may look a little intimidating, but this first line is actually just saying conservation of mass. So mass cannot be created or destroyed. This next line here is just saying conservation of momentum. which is basically Newton's second law, sum of the forces equals mass times acceleration. And this final equation represents what's called a scalar, which I'll be using it to represent essentially a dye in water or color of smoke. So the Reynolds number here is at that small laboratory scale, so it's quite low. And the Schmidt number, which tells me how that scalar, the color dissipates, is going to be quite high to ensure that I don't have any dissipation of the smoke or the color. So within my computational fluid dynamics setup, I need to specify what's called the domain, which is how I solve my equations. So here I have an inlet on the left where I specify the incoming flow. It passes over a no-slip wall, which is my cylinder. Basically, fluid has viscosity, which is sort of how sticky it is. And even air and water has some stickiness to it. And so as it passes around the cylinder, it's going to want to stick to it. And that stickiness is eventually what causes the von Karman vortex downstream of it. And here I have a very long downstream extent to my domain so that I can see the full development of those von Karman vortices. So one important thing I need to do is validate my CFD, my computer simulations with reality, because it could be that my computer simulations are solving the incorrect equations or they're not solving them correctly, and that means that the results don't have any bearing on reality. But what I see here is that from the experiments up the top, which are done in water at a similar Reynolds number to my own experiments on the computer, we have a very similar picture emerging with this von Karman vortex streak occurring. You can see the experiments have a much sort of more defined dye in the water, so it's much clearer and whiter with stronger edges compared to my own CFD simulations. And that's due to that Schmidt number effect, where essentially my mesh can't resolve some of those details. But it looks sort of close enough. The other thing I can use to validate my experiments is if I imagine I'm sitting at a point downstream here, every few seconds, one of these vortices will wash over me as they convect downstream. So that means that there's going to be a very particular frequency of these vortices washing over me. And so I can take that frequency and compare that to the experiments. So here I have the frequency F of that periodic shedding multiplied by the diameter of the cylinder divided by the free stream velocity or the flow speed. And that gives me what's called a non-dimensional Strahl number. This is basically a way to easily compare all these different experiments which might be done in water or air in a consistent manner. And against Reynolds number, we have the lines here show some physical lab experiments, and my own data at Reynolds number of 75 shows some agreement with those lab experiments. So I'm confident that my simulations are accurately representing reality. So now I get onto the actual meat of the project. Remember that I have that scalar C, which I'm going to color to represent basically different colors in the flow. It could be dye in water or smoke in air. So that's that scalar C. And what I'll do is I'll specify different values of that scalar, and then I'll color them as different colors. So if the value is 0.5, I color that sort of white. If it's 1, I color that red. And if it's 0, I color that black. And then with a step function of that value, I can then get these white, red, and black colors at the inlet of my domain. In terms of the percentages of colors, there's 28% red and black and 44% white. And I've got these percentages just from an image analysis of this core 5-5 pattern. So there's more white because obviously it borders both the red and the black. So then I let this scalar into the domain, and then it gets washed over the cylinder. One thing I have to decide is the repeating length of the red, white, and black colors, whether it's very fine or coarser. Here I decided on a repeating length equal to the diameter. So the length of red, white, and black is equal to the diameter of the cylinder. That just because visually it looks quite nice, basically. I do have to make a little bit of a confession. What happens over time, I started off with those very distinct red, white, and black patterns. So it's a very sharp step function. Over time, that will slowly diffuse outwards, which physically looks like a whitening of those colors. But what I can do is if I scale the scalar by the distance downstream, that enables me to return to my very vibrant colors, as you see down the bottom. So that's actually what I'm plotting in the images. So with that, I can then let my simulation run and just see what happens as I have these colors passing around the cylinder. And I see what I get is this sort of dynamic core 5-5 pattern, which does look quite reminiscent of the core 5-5 patterns I showed earlier. The important thing to emphasize here is that, as I said, these are governed by the physical laws that I set up in my CFD simulation. So it obeys conservation of mass and momentum. So this suggests that typical 5i patterns, which I showed earlier, may have some of this understanding embedded within them. So to sort of summarize, so what I've talked about today, and also what Pasha has talked about, is that just by observation and validation of several generations, Polynesians obtained a very sophisticated understanding of fluid dynamics, as well as the applications through aerodynamics and hydrodynamics. And so, especially what I'm doing now is reviewing my practices, acknowledging precedents where it occurs earlier in Indigenous thought. So, as I said, the Von Karman vortex is from maybe 1907. These waka paddle canoes diagrams are from 1769. So there's clearly some precedents that should be acknowledged there. And so what I'm doing is I'm updating some of my teaching material to incorporate some of these Indigenous thoughts into it.
Yeah, well, thank you for that comment, Marta, because it does underlie this thing of the awareness of the environment and how you can use how there's so much information in the environment that can be used in all facets of life. And then just to go over to Desna now, Desna, from your work both as a creative and then in working across this boundary between Mataranga Māori and science, as well as all your governance roles and everything else, and as well as your explorations into your whakapapa and walking over the whenua, the land. Whakapapa is genealogy. What are there like three things that are sort of most important that you would want to reinforce to this audience about how we should be approaching environment? What are the three, just a couple of key takeaway points you'd like to reinforce perhaps from your presentation?
Yeah, I think, one of the key things that's coming up for us at the moment around sort of looking at environmental management is reinforcing the idea that humans are a part of the environment, that we're not separate from it, that we are not discrete from the environment, and that once you understand that and sit within that space, then you start to talk about things like we have a relationship with the moana, and what is our relationship, and what is the voice of the moana? So what is the voice of the sea, and what is our relationship with the sea, and what is our relationship with the earth, with Papatūānuku? And to understand that we are part of the environment and that we have a relationship with it is quite different from a concept of sort of preservation. So you have a different way of interacting with the environment that nurtures the environment, and therefore the environment nurtures you. So the relational understanding of the way that we operate within all of the ecosystems, I think is really key to shifting the way that I guess the way that we place priorities within our lives, and what is our role here, and how do we use the tools that we're given to be able to to support that, and what is meaningful about what you do, why you're learning the things that you learn, and how do you contribute to that picture. So the relational thing I think is major for us. Another kōrero too is the understanding. So remember when the Whanganui River was first recognised in a legislation to be a living entity, rather than Western legislation to be a living entity. And some of the sort of comments that were coming up around that, of people mocking it, and I guess if you understand that the trees and the water and that the moana are living entities, and not so much in a godlike way, but in an ecosystem way, that within them there's a million different sort of living entities as well, that also changes from thinking that you can just kind of take whatever it is that you want out of that particular thing and put whatever you like back into it without any sort of regard for or respect for that ecosystem. So the living entity kind of concept, and you could apply that to pretty much all of our ecosystems. Sorry, just also to speak to the sort of spiritual, because that again has been, I feel like, very much misunderstood when we talk about atua, who could be, say, which is often understood as being gods. So like the god of the sea, Tangaroa, But if you thought that tangaro is actually just a description of an ecosystem rather than a god, this isn't something that you're praising, this is something that you have respect for, and therefore you have an interactive relationship with. And ditto like tawhiri matia. So tawhiri matia being the storms kind of that are raging outside at the moment. If you understand that tawhiri matia is an ecosystem, then yes, you do have respect for winds and storms and the way that things move around, but it's not a god to be praised, and therefore it isn't pagan either. It's science and ecosystems. Yeah, I think it's sort of decoding again, or remembering that we do understand these things, and that perhaps definitely, I mean, the colonization process has placed a separation layer between us and our ancestral knowings, which is both damaging to Māori, but also damaging to the environment, because it lost our relationship with those things. And yeah, I think a lot of the work that we do when we reconnect with our ancestral knowings of place and understandings of place is a process of healing, both in learning, but also reliving and resituating yourselves in terms of that's the way that we should operate, or that we can operate within our knowledge systems.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I wanted to just reinforce for the audience. Yes, the legislation was passed several years ago now, where the Wanganui River was given the same legal status and rights as a person. And yeah, I mean, we heard Desna talk about this was sometimes mocked, but actually it's a very realistic way to look at a river, and it does change your awareness of how you interact with a river when you think about it in that way. And then your point about the atua being ecosystems, Hurirangi would be really happy with that, because that's what he said. He said that these are actually energies. They were explained to missionaries as gods because it was considered that that was how missionaries would understand gods. But so his cosmology, he referred to it as natural universal energies, te hihiri o te taiao. And then it's the energistic level that we should be attending to here. And then, yeah, just the remembering. Now, just one other thing that I might ask is, how are you finding the response from authority about these ideas around, the ecosystems, revisiting our relationship? How does that go down with like local authorities and then the national government level and all of that sort of thing? Have you got a lens on what the receptivity of those ideas is in the hierarchy of political systems?
I think, we're still in a moment of a lot of change around that. There is, well, just recently, I'd say within a sort of last year and a half or so, there's the whole raft of new policies that have come out within the freshwater space. There's 3 waters, there's Manawa to Wai, and the marine space. There were some white papers that came out last year, and all of these have sort of clauses in them that say that the regional councils and local councils and also Crown will work in partnership with tangata whenua, so to enact that treaty partnership. The thing is that we don't actually know what that looks like yet, because we haven't been able to do that. We haven't had that opportunity before. So those things are it's still an exploratory space in a way. And even thinking about things like co-governance, or is that co-governance as we stand alongside each other, or is that actually acknowledging 2 sovereign knowledge systems? And so therefore there's a lot of rearranging that is going to go across everything else. Yeah, there's a lot to be investigated, and I see a lot of potential and a lot of hope, but it's interesting when I look at what's happening, say, with the local council, where you might still have the regional council here employing somebody that's got enough of the letters, the alphabet soup after their name kind of thing, to come along and manage the replanting of some of our rivers here, because apparently they know more than, say, my mother, who has a doctorate and who has lived on Helen Twaira no forever, ahika. who knows the whakapapa of our place and all the names of the trees and the fish and the birds and haven't moved. And that does have a doctorate, but somehow somebody that is European with the right alphabet soup is more knowledgeable. So there's that power play going on, and a misunderstanding too that can be quite patriarchal and that can prioritize a sort of a European or a crown way of doing things. So I feel, there's a lot of shift and there's potential, and I feel a lot more hope now than I'd say when we formed a whole maybe sort of 16 or 17 years ago. That was, it's been a big journey to get to this point, but it'll be interesting to see where things happen, where they go to in the next few years particularly.
Yeah, sure. And then just to put a similar sort of question to Nina is, you've been curating Indigenous work since the very early 1990s. So how have you found, how was that, was that difficult to get going? Was there much resistance, or was there, in those early years and through the 1990s? How did you find the reception in the art science world to engaging with Indigenous?
At that time, it was not arts and science so much. It was general public. There was absolutely no resistance. There was a lot of interest. I mean, it was a much easier time than now, because then you had much more support. I had support from both the Canada Council, which is the Art Council of Canada, and also the Department of External Affairs. And you could also have much better communication, direct communication, because through your work, you met all these people who were in charge of support. And it was a very honest, open discussion. And, I phoned them up and I said, I have an invitation from Russia to show Indigenous Canadian art. Do you think you will support me? You can't tell me ahead of time because I have to put in an application. But can you just tell me so that I can save myself 3 months of work? And they told me. And because the invitations were strong and the projects were strong, I have to say it was very successful. They were today you cannot do it.
Sure.
But it was a lot of interest.
Oh, great. I'm pleased to hear that. And then, tell us about in the Vancouver ICEA 2015, for that workshop or forum or whatever, there was a particular way you laid out the seating. Can you just describe for the audience how you laid out the seating, why you did it that way, and what the result was?
This was just one of the methods. I always try to do sitting everybody around. And that means that in these events, sometimes you have to have 3 circles because there are 300 people at least, and it worked. And in some even bigger events, I don't have a podium. I don't ask for a podium. The presenters talk from the circle itself. They are among the people. And that's what.
So it's a much more organic way to lay out a space, and it does actually take sitting in a circle is an Indigenous practice, right? And it is a kind of leveler. But what's good about it is that it does encourage discussion. People feel okay because you have reduced the hierarchy of ordinary presentations, and it's something that we as academics should maybe think about. We often say, we really want to have discussion, but we use these approaches of people standing at the front, the presenter at the front of the room, which actually goes against it. It's only the loud voices that ask the questions, and if you really want debate, you actually need some of the quieter people
to be taking part. One thing about taking indigenous art, especially to Europe. It not now. I mean, this, you know, it's a different situation today. But then, I mean, there was no information and knowledge about contemporary art. Okay, contemporary indigenous art, but there were all sorts of romantic, strange stories, and we don't have time that I could tell you. But for example, just one little example, in Hungary, they invited some people, indigenous people from Canada, and they all made themselves clothes which they thought indigenous people would wear. And the people, the group, came in suits, white shirt, because it was, their reality was different.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I once described my curatorial career as a sequence of mistakes as tangata whenua slowly took me through the appropriate kaupapa and how to be and think. So I do thank tangata whenua for that. Just to go over to Michael, you know, Michael, there was recently, I don't know, it was about 6 months ago, quite a strong controversy in the University of Auckland, where some of the senior academics came out with the statement that Mataranga Māori was not science. I don't know if you recall that sort of exploding in the media for a little bit. And then I noticed that on your final slide, you did talk about how you were now, you know, refreshing your student handouts and all that sort of thing. So within the academic institution, how are you finding the receptivity to the sort of work that, you know, you and I have done? Is there a level of openness, and is that a generational thing, or what's give us a little bit of insight from behind all that?
Yeah, so I think it is partly a generational thing. I'd say the university as a whole is quite supportive of this kind of research and these sort of investigations, which is really reassuring. I think the issue is a bit more kind of systemic in the way the science system works and how mostly we're expected to be publishing papers and getting grants, and that's sort of the focus, not so much the actual research that you're doing. So trying to do some of this research, if it's not publishing papers, then the system may not necessarily support that. So I think some of those systemic issues in science may need to be addressed to be able to enable and support this kind of research.
Yes, it's sort of interesting. I don't know what the situation is internationally, but here in Aotearoa, you know, this point about the interconnected world. So we often, most universities have interdisciplinary research departments, right, who do projects, often in the field, engaging with tangata whenua, but we don't have interdisciplinary departments yet. We still have these categories of knowledge, which, as you've just pointed out, the categories of knowledge in Western thinking, philosophy, science, whatever, actually break down this approach to the interconnected world, and our relation to, which is the biggest lesson, I think, from Indigenous peoples. Understand our relationship with nature and the environment. But now, so Ricardo, is Nina going to say something?
Yes.
I know we are running out of time. I just want to say about related academia and so forth, and interconnectedness, that the first step, and I'm fighting for this, is dual degrees. Once we will have dual degrees between, I don't know, science and art and engineering, it will be much easier to talk to each other. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that in many universities and many institutions, I mean, it's not that you have like interdisciplinary departments, but I think that something that is needed is just to facilitate the structures, because sometimes the universities have been created for, yes, in a time and with a scope and a vision where you need to divide, where you need to separate because you want to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. The issue is that after so many years, yes, in many disciplines, almost every discipline, we have been going like we are going deeper and deeper and deeper. The issue is that sometimes we lose the overall prospectus, and then to exchange ideas, to exchange visions, it becomes not only a problem of, or not mainly an issue of the people who wants to do it, because there are a lot of people coming from different disciplines that want to collaborate with others in different fields. The issue is that maybe the structure that is containing you, for example, a university, is not ready for that. At least many institutions are not giving you the facilities to do that. So if you do certain kind of things with a certain approach, it is a problem. If you want to share, for example, a class between 2 or 3 different people, and then you decide to have, you know, 1 credit for 1 professor, 1 credit, because it's a 3-credit class, and then you want to have 3 different people from 3 different departments. Well, that could be an issue. I mean, in some institutions you can do that, but in most that I know, that is really difficult. So everyone is telling you, oh yes, we want to do multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, because this will move forward a lot of people that has a deep knowledge in the disciplinary realm. But at the same time, when you want to connect, you find that yes, you can do it outside the grid, like outside the overall model, because the model was created for something different. So now that we want to do, I think it's a utopian vision, but I support this idea of transdisciplinarity. That is very utopian. You can do this outside, most of the time outside the institution, but when you want to do it inside, just to try to do it, it becomes extremely difficult, to be honest. Yeah.
From the 19th century, they still kept their own.
Yes, I think that we
are as old as me, which is very old.
I mean, as we have some technical issues, we are making some recordings of this part, and we hope to connect this to the rest. But so we can take another 5 minutes just to wrap up and to round around certain issues. I have a lot of questions, to be honest, but maybe even if very short, comment questions. You know, I found a lot of interesting things from, for example, what you were saying, Desna, about ephemerality, ephemeral things, and how this is in society, culture, etc. But in particular, was for me very touching about the co-governance. Yes, because then we enter in not just good intentions, but I mean, how we go a step further or several steps further. And on that sense, I have at least 2 questions. Let's see if we can do it, if we make it more or less short. One is how you, I mean, all of you, I mean, anyone can answer, how you see the relation between traditional Maori culture and knowledge and, let's say, the Western, I don't know how to call it, the Western science. Yes, the science, because Michael was giving some examples. I mean, all of you were approaching this in different ways, and Michael, together with Pasha, were bringing a concrete example of some connections. But I mean, I would love to hear your vision about how the things connect in a broader sense, not just one example, but I mean, is it possible? Is it too naive? There are concrete possibilities of, because finally the idea of meeting here is always to give examples, to share knowledge, but also to propose solutions. If you want solution, I know it's too ambitious, you know, but let's try.
Can I, one of the most interesting projects that I've worked on in recent years is Taitimu Taipari, which is the Hauraki Gulf Marine Spatial Plan, which is the water, the Gulf in front of Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau. And one of the breakthrough moments for us there in terms of like having Mātauranga Māori knowledge systems and the science working together was that to hold that plan together, the overarching structure of it is guided by Te Ao Māori, so Māori principles. And and that forms that interconnected weave. Like here's the bigger picture is the Māori knowledge. And then what the science has brought to it, like the Western kind of understanding of what science is sort of the granular detail. So how do we go about doing that? And it's like all of the points that are sitting within the greater whole. And in that way, you know, they can really nurture each other and work together. The reason why that was kind of a breakthrough moment for us is because up until we kind of figured that out, there was an issue going on with the mana whenua, so the iwi or the tribes of that particular area that look after and have a relationship with that water, and then the Western scientists, and they wanted to have like a chapter on the Māori knowledge, and then we'll have all of the Western science after that kind of thing. And so, yeah, and the iwi had stopped everything because they didn't want to just be like the preface kind of thing to what was considered knowledge that was of a higher order. But then once we reshuffled things, went, no, actually Mātauranga understands all of these things, and then Western science can help us, you know, monitor the things within it. Yeah, I think it's quite a beautiful marriage.
I don't know if
I want to say,
Marta.
Des, know how right you are, and I think how important it is to also look at the way we actually want Pākehā to work with us. And for me, I've got this thing about you walk beside me, you never run in front of me, because that's what you've been doing for years. But walk beside me. I'm happy that you walk beside me, but don't tell me what to do when I'm the expert. So you know then that things are working really well. And I know that kahu whakatere is working really well because Pākehās are there to support me in any way that they can to do that, because they see the evolution taking place. They see us as Māori taking control. You know, that's our sovereignty. And I think that's what we have to live for, is know what our sovereignty is and work with our own sovereignty, because we're not going to get it from anywhere else. And I know it's going to prove difficult for a few years, but if we work together as Māori and we have the white world saying, we will work beside you. You've got to remember, we're fighting 85% of the population in New Zealand. We're not fighting, 15%. So others, it's a big crew. And we have that 15% that we have to struggle with to model. And then because of the power that there is in that other corner, it's difficult. But I say, let's work together. And I know the groups that I work with, a lot of peace groups, and I say, don't ever walk in front of me. You'll never find peace with us Māori if you do that. And that's one of the ways I'm walking forward, is walk beside me.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you.
I don't know if is there any other comment. If not, I would like to. I have a comment and a question. Well, the comment is when Pasha, when you were mentioning, for example, there are a lot of things we could stay here forever talking about these things. And I mean, you were mentioning in one of your slides, you were mentioning ethics related to science and art and business and all human activity. But at the same time, I was thinking, yes, yes, I agree. But I mean, what that means, because I mean, you have your vision. You are in New Zealand. I'm from Argentina. I live in Montreal, but today I'm in Colombia. Yes, and I'm learning a lot from being in different places. I was lucky enough to be in New Zealand, so like 10 years ago. It's a beautiful and wonderful place. But I mean, you have your vision. I mean, and if you take the vision of the Maori culture, it could be one or it could be multiple, because you don't need to have just one vision for everything. But I mean, the ethics, when you change culture, people, places, well, the ethics could be different in one place and the other. So how we can, let's say Pasha or anyone who can answer, I mean, how can we go a step further and say, okay, where we want to go, because yes, we can agree here because we are 6, maybe we are lucky enough to agree in what ethics related to certain things are, but we see the world around us and life is much more difficult than that. And who knows if 6 people here could agree in multiple topics? Maybe yes, because we are talking about a certain topic, etc., etc. But how we can go a step further? I mean, that will be, I don't know if a question, but it's a comment about how I see this point, that I fully agree with you, Pasha, but at the same time, I'm asking myself about how we go into something that where we agree what those ethics mean. And I think that's a challenge, yes, how we move forward, because you are seated from a certain culture and a certain place and a certain vision. So how we can share that?
Yeah, look, it's the thing is, it's an attitude, and then it's a part of the attitude is to understand it is connected. But even without that, in regard to environment, we have to do all the little things, and it doesn't matter where you are. So, you know, I think about now in my creative practice, how am I going to use less energy? How am I going to reduce the carbon footprint of my activities? It's not saying don't do it. I mean, for, you know, using a data projector, you know, I've walked into galleries where the data projectors are playing. The Govett Brewster had 17 data projectors playing and only the information officers standing in the galleries. Well, you know, if you really want to play a data projector, you should schedule times for it to show. It's one way of doing things, and then you should be thinking about your waste. It's like an attitude. It's just a whole attitude. I encourage people in cities to grow plants on their balconies, and many people do actually grow a plant, but everybody needs to reconnect with nature. It's just an attitude. It's there. I don't think it won't work if we make laws and say you can and can't do this. We have to bring everybody together, and it's just a change in attitude. Everybody can do a little thing in their own life that actually works against the issues around the Anthropocene. And probably, you know, Intercreate started its venture with engaging Indigenous groups by simply saying, we don't need to become Indigenous or change our clothes or whatever. We just need to accept that the Indigenous voice has a place around the table of the discussions, right? But actually, it's moved on now. If we don't listen to what Indigenous people are saying, we're going to knock off the planet. It's actually got that serious. You know, it's the temperature changes in the Antarctic, unbelievable, off the record books. All of the floods all over Earth. It's just phenomenal. It's happening right in front of our very eyes, and it's now become urgent to listen to the Indigenous voice and take on some of these awarenesses. And then what does it cost you to feel that you have a relationship with nature or the environment around you? It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't compromise your freedom, but it changes how you see things.
Yeah, and I think you said something very important about the idea of it's not the point about replacement. Is a position, or is the point is about having a voice and being listened and participate. Like you said, there's not about governance. I mean, you can see this in different aspects, but I mean, plurality, and you can agree or not. I mean, I'm not necessarily agreeing. I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying, okay, I agree with everything that you are saying. Maybe yes, but maybe not. But we need to have, I think it's important to hear different perspectives, different approaches, and learn from each other. I mean, that's like the basic thing. I don't know if you have other questions or comments, but I would like to have something at least maybe to close. But my point is, I don't want to sound too negative, but I mean, this world is a little bit complex. Things are not easy. We are living really hard times. So when I think about if the like it was said, I mean, not about the human species, like I was, you know, it is said that the human species is going to survive. That what we don't know is if civilization is going to survive. So let's take that civilization could survive, okay? What else can we do? I know it's too difficult, and I know everyone is doing your best. I mean, you're doing the best you can with all the projects. I'm doing the best I can with this project, like Felipe, Londoño, everyone. But I mean, if you think that, okay, what are, if you could, what else you would be doing? Because we don't know. I mean, you know, sometimes like 100 of people is listening to this, and well, it is enough with one person who has the facilities, capabilities, power, etc., to make a change. So I think it is important to share not only what we do, but also, I don't know, what we dream, we could say. I mean, what we think that can be done. So anything that you want to share, I think is, on that sense, is very welcome.
I mean, I do have something, but I want. Do any of the others want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll do a lot for whatever we could, because I know you, I know Pasha for many years, and we just fight. I just know I have been fighting since I'm a little thing. But it gets sometimes someplace.
Yes, sometimes it's interesting to see how certain projects evolves outside simply because someone was putting together a project just to present in a symposium or gathering on in Balance-Unbalance, etc. And maybe 5 years after, you found that it was developing and developing and developing and was growing into something really interesting that is totally out of your control, that you maybe didn't know, even if I was behind the overall idea. So I think that's great. But that's the reason I'm asking if you have not necessarily something that you could do. It could be something that you think that should be done, and you have some ideas maybe for that.
Okay, yeah. So look, the thing is, I'm going to throw a gigantic curveball here, because the question is, how do we save civilization, right? That's the fundamental point of your question. And I'm going to tell you that the answer is we need to learn to live like lizards. You know, the tuatara has been around. It's a lizard that lives in Aotearoa here. It has been with us since the age of the dinosaurs. If civilization fails, it will still be here. So we need to learn to live like lizards. If we really want to solve it, so what does a lizard do? It's sitting out there in the environment. It has to use its wits to survive. And it's done it for millions and millions of years. It survived the extinction of the dinosaurs, for example. So that we need to take lessons. It's a complete change of psychological state. And then the other thing that I'm big on is paying attention to insects. But anyway, a little curveball at the end of it: learn to be a lizard and you'll save civilization.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no other comments, thank you so much.
I want to make one comment, Ricardo.
Sure. Of course.
And that is, when we do kahu whakatiri, one of the purposes of doing kahu whakatiri was that it was without any chemicals. So, you know, all of these coffins that are used, and they aren't natural, because, you know, when you also use formaldehyde and you put that into the ground, and over years it becomes sincere poison to Mother Earth. And when we look, and I'm looking at this end of things, and I think it's important we make decisions about how we actually leave this earth, you know, and look at different ways. And I think America's got an answer. I'm not absolutely sure that it is the answer, and they do hydrolysis to get rid of bodies. So I like the idea. The only unfortunate thing for me is I try to get it out of my head that, you know, it all goes down the plug hole. But it's in a way it's safe because it's, you know, it's not poison being put into the system. So I'm thinking about all the poisons that we put into not only our bodies but into Mother Earth, and how we dispose of things into Mother Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Nina?
Sorry,
Yes.
my wife, I actually have to chair another meeting.
Okay, now we are ending here, so don't worry. So thank you so much, Marta, Nina, Desna, Michael, Pasha. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Has
Thank you
been
very
great
much.
to have you here.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you for
It's been great.